Welcome to another episode of Hollywood Kitchen. Today I have filmmaker and documentarian Roger Mimos in Hollywood Kitchen, and we're going to talk all about the incredible actress and activist Marsha Hunt. So welcome everybody, and welcome Roger. I really
Thank you. I'm
appreciate
glad to
this.
be here in your cozy little kitchen.
Yes, I'm so happy to have you here. For those people who may be watching this that don't know about Marsha Hunt or are unfamiliar with her, what would you tell them?
Well, first of all, she was that big an actress that people started naming their babies after her. But Marsha was an actress during the golden age of film. She started at age 17 in 1935. She was discovered in Hollywood, and she had kind of a magical start to her career, at first at Paramount and then at MGM. And then she had a couple of little valleys. She was blacklisted, and that's another whole story.
Which we'll get into.
But basically, what you should know about Marsha was that she was one of the first activists, one of the first celebrity activists to use her celebrity to help those in need.
And she lived a very long life, which we'll talk more about that in detail. She lived to be 104.
Yes, she did. Almost 105.
And I got to meet her, so I'll share that photo coming up soon too.
It's great.
She was an amazing lady. So for today's recipe, this recipe comes from a 1938 cookbook called Famous Stars' Favorite Foods. This was one of the hardest ones to track down, to be honest. And the recipe is called Marsha Hunt's Chocolate Indians. Obviously, we're not going to call it that. And when I made this, I always do at least one test bake before, an actual episode. Basically, they turned out like brownies, very cake-like brownies. So we're going to do the recipe really quickly here. And what you'll need to make these are 3/4 cup of sifted cake flour. Now, in the spirit of authenticity, I got swans down, and I'm not being paid to say this, by the way, but it says cake flour, not regular flour. And also, this company has been around since 1894. So this would have been around in 1938 when this cookbook was made. And I'm assuming there's a big difference between cake flour and non-cake flour. So you have the cake flour. I already added the 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda into the cake flour. I've pre-melted in the pot here 2 squares of chocolate unsweetened. Now, my friend Mary Stanford is definitely my close friend and collaborator. Even if she's not in the episode, she's always helping me behind the scenes. And she told me to make sure after you melt the chocolate, you let it cool, because if the chocolate's hot and then you add the eggs, you get the scrambled egg effect.
Who knew that?
I learned this the hard way because when I made Douglas Fairbanks's lemon pie, I had to do it 4 different times because every time I did it, I'd mix it all up. And then all of a sudden it would be like lemon liquid with scrambled eggs floating in it. So that was very tricky for me to learn that lesson, apparently. We're going to add 1/3 cup of butter or shortening. So we've got the dry ingredients here. We're going to add the butter and the chocolate here. I'm using my hot plate, but when I did the test bake, I used my new KitchenAid mixer right over there.
Wow.
Okay, so we sift the flour, measure that out, put it with the baking soda. We're going to combine the sugar, the butter, and the melted chocolate. So we're going to get that started right here. I am going to have the butter melt.
It's a lot of butter.
It is a lot of butter.
Butter's the secret, I think, don't you?
Well, I think that's part of it. And back then too, everything has butter or lard or, oh my gosh, it's just a whole different way of cooking. But so we're going to add the butter and the chocolate here, and I'm going to stir. And while I'm stirring, we can go ahead and have our conversation about Marsha. So how did you first meet Marsha and kind of come into her life?
Well, it was around 1999. I was working on a documentary on the Blacklist about Carl Foreman, their screenwriter, producer, director, about his journey through the Blacklist and his dealings with Stanley Kramer. And Marsha came in to be interviewed because she also had a Blacklist story that was dealing with Stanley Kramer. And she brought her book with her, and I thought, wow, this woman's interesting. I just fascinated by her book and what she did. And then when I heard her Blacklist story, I kind of knew that I couldn't just do a documentary on her fashions and her movies. I had to include the Blacklist.
Oh yeah.
And that's where I met her, and that was in 2000, and it wasn't really till it took me till like 2006 to get my act together, and finally I asked her, "Can I do a documentary on your life?" And she said, "As long as it's as you and you, it's not." It's funny. She said, "As long as it's not just about my book, that it includes everything, as
Good.
activism." And
Yeah.
yeah, it was really the right thing to do.
Well, by the way, for those who haven't seen it, Robert made this terrific documentary called Marsha Hunt Sweet Adversity. You can find it on DVD and you can find it online. And it's about her film career, her activism, her deal,
Right.
her horrible ordeal with the blacklist. And one moment that really to me was kind of character defining in your documentary was there's a moment where she's sitting in this, I guess it was in the lobby somewhere, and John Huston walks by her and he won't even look at her. He just basically tells her to, go ahead and say you were duped. So that way you can keep your career. And he did that. She did not. And to me, I kind of saw that as a major turning point because I try really hard to be empathetic and put myself in other people's shoes. And
Right.
how would it feel when you've had a dream your whole life to be a star, to act? You get to do that, and then almost overnight, something completely unjust, unfair
That's right.
happens, and you could lose everything. Like, honestly, I know it's horrible, the people that name names or the people that claim to be duped, but on one hand, they could have been absolutely terrified of losing their careers, their
Well,
livelihoods, and
but yeah, sorry, but what
yeah,
I'm
it's okay.
say is, Marsha told a story that I didn't really put on the documentary, but she tells a story that one night, she and Robert, her husband, were lying in bed, and they sort of made a pact. They made a decision. They weren't going to be angry at people that named names, because she said maybe they had their own reasons. Maybe they had families and to feed, and like you said, they were afraid. And
Yeah,
she felt so strongly about that. But what you're talking about here is that she acted on her conscience. She was very
totally.
disappointed in John Huston. But remember, John Huston worked at Warner Brothers, and the Warners, the people that did. Remember, Humphrey Bogart and Lauren Bacall also recanted, Warner
Hmm.
Brothers stars. So they
Yeah.
got to John Huston,
Hmm.
and he just disappointed her.
Yeah, that
Especially
scene.
because he and Humphrey Bogart were the architects of the committee for the First Amendment,
Yeah,
and it was a
yeah.
betrayal that she just didn't
Really.
see coming.
Yeah, I'm gonna, by the way, as we're
Oh,
talking here, I'm gonna slowly add in the sugar and the other ingredients. But yeah, I mean, because I was fortunate enough when early in my Hollywood days, I met a blacklisted screenwriter at the WGA. I used to work for a Hollywood agent who represented writers. And the man's name was Oliver Crawford. And he wrote a script called Ollie, Folly, and the Blacklist about his ordeal of being blacklisted.
yes.
And he did a reading of it at the WGA, which I attended. And he and I kind of struck up a friendship and everything. And he said he got up in front of the audience after the screenplay was read, and he said, "I'd like to tell you that I was brave and that I handled this like a champ." He said, "I'll be honest, I was absolutely terrified.
Mm,
And this was such a scary time in my life."
yeah.
And even it stayed with him because he, at one point, he had to have an operation. And I told him, I'm going to go to the hospital and see you. Well, I go to downtown LA, I go to the hospital, and they're like, "There's no one here by his name." And I kept saying, "No, he's here. He's here. I know he's here." No, no one here by his name. So I called one of the kids, his children, and I said, "Hey, I went to go visit your dad in the hospital." They said, "Oh, we should have told you. He doesn't use his real name,"
Mm,
because a lot of the blacklist stuff was so scary for him.
right.
It's like there's still lingering effects of that on
Right.
him. And that really stayed with me. Like, my God, this is decades later, and you know, that's
Yeah.
still a thing.
I never met him, but I knew his daughter Vicky. We worked together on a couple of shows. So if you're watching, Vicky, hello.
And it was scary. And again, like I said, it just the thought of losing everything that you have worked so hard and dreamed so hard of, that had to have been really just terrifying for
Yeah.
people. And
Well, it was a
mhm,
terrifying time, according to Marsha. There was nothing rational about it. People crossed the streets to not talk to people. Um, I remember talking to Betty Garrett shortly before she passed away, and about the blacklist. And I felt terrible because she was so upset. It hit a chord, and she said to me, where was the committee for the First Amendment when we needed them? And I told her,
They folded.
they folded because her husband, Larry Parks, was supposed to testify the next day, but they canceled the hearing, and he had to hold off until the Hollywood hearings, I think 3 years later. I think it was 1950. And she said to me, where were they? And of course, I felt so terrible. I should not have. One thing you learn, I guess, as a filmmaker is, Betty Garrett was a family friend, but she also knew Marsha as an activist. Not so much of they shared the blacklist story. I wish that I had just talked to her about the activism, but that just goes to your point that all these years later, it was extremely painful, even for Betty Garrett, for her to say, where was the committee for the First Amendment?
And it was just the unfairness of the whole thing. And to be honest, the parallels right now with a lot of stuff that's going on in the world,
It's true.
it just really, your documentary is it's excellent, and it really sheds light on what that was like. And it's unbelievable when you see the footage of that guy going, oh, there's no list, there's no blacklist, whatever. And then you see her saying, no, there was red channels.
Well, and the other thing I want to say about the blacklist is this guy, Roy Brewer, he was obsessed with her. He was obsessed that he couldn't get her to recant.
And she's a woman, so I'm sure
Yes.
there was even more pressure on her.
Well, and she got Harry Belafonte was also blacklisted. He somehow had better luck with getting out of getting past it sooner than Marsha did. But she the thing is, let me see if I can remember my statistics. Between 1935, when she was discovered at Paramount, to 1952, where the blacklist really took effect, she had done 54 films in 17 years. And then after that, she'd only done 8. Now, she did go on to work a lot of episodic television, and she did plays, and it's not like she didn't work, but she felt like she was on a trajectory that, who would know what would have happened if she wasn't blacklisted? You know what I mean?
Too, that's always so sad about Hollywood history is when you look at World War II, Hollywood came together. You had all these people joining forces for the war effort, doing USO tours, right. The Hollywood Canteen, selling war bonds. It was such a rare time of such extreme unity. And then it felt like right after the war, it just blew apart into 1,000 pieces.
Yeah, the 50s were an era of fear.
Totally. And it's just so sad because lives were ruined. I mean, we know John Garfield died of a massive heart attack. He was 39 years old. So I think the pressure of the blacklist is absolutely what was to blame.
Suicides, Philip Loeb. Yeah, a lot of I'm trying to think of who else, but yeah,
it's that long ago is the thing too. Like it wasn't that far into our past that this whole thing happened.
Yeah,
like it just shocks me sometimes to think this could happen here, but it absolutely did.
Yeah, it's coming along.
Stirring all this together here.
It's harder than one would think. I mean, I suppose if you were using the food processor.
Yeah, I have
but this is cool.
There's a Buy Nothing group in my neighborhood, and a lady gave away a KitchenAid mixer.
The Buy Nothing group. Yeah,
I have one of those for eternity, and it's very expensive. So that was a huge thrill to win that. But it makes noise, and that's not conducive for being live. So I'm just kind of doing this by hand.
If you were on a national television show, you'd be using that.
There you go.
But I love this.
But Marsha had guts, and to stand up in a situation like that and say, no, I'm not going to do this.
Well, she wrote to the networks and said why she, all the philanthropic things, endeavors that she had done, working at the Hollywood Canteen. What didn't she do? I mean, I have look here. I have here Marsha Hunt, record of social activism, life achievement, 1935, 2017. I have her resume printed out by decades, 1930 to 1940. It's 7 pages long. This is just her activism. United Cerebral Palsy, what lived during the war, listen to this, Women's Ambulance Defense Corps of America. And
Wow.
don't forget, I didn't go into it too long in the documentary, but she went to the Arctic, a USO tour of the Arctic.
Yeah.
I mean,
I
that's,
mean, and we have Marsha at Hollywood Forever. She's in the Abbey of the Psalms.
she is.
And being that I've been the tour guide there for a long time, sometimes people ask me, like, what is your takeaway after doing this? Like, how do you feel about spending time in a cemetery? I get asked that sometimes. And I told someone recently, I said, you know what? I feel like I have to make my life count because even the graves that aren't famous, I know a lot of the stories because I look them up, and you think that person didn't see that bus coming, that person didn't see that plane blowing up, that person didn't know they were going to get sick at 30 or whatever. So I try to feel like I have to do the best I can with the time I get to be here. And I look at Marsha's life, and this is why she inspires me so much. This is someone who made it count, who made every second they existed on
Yeah.
this earth count. And I
Yeah.
don't think you could aspire to more than that.
Yeah, and I have to tell you about the documentary. One thing that surprised me, um, I think I'm blown away with the blacklist aspect of it, the story of the blacklist, because Marsha is first person and her stories are like, whoa. But most people, many people are, the takeaway from the documentary is the activism.
Yo,
People have
yeah.
told me that like after they watched the film, they Googled Marsha, they were inspired to do something on their own. So just to your point about making your life matter, yeah, that's what Marsha was an actress, but her top priority was her fellow man.
Yeah, and I feel like just in studying Hollywood history in general, there almost seems to be two camps. Like the stars that there's nothing else other than being a star. And once that goes away, for whatever the reason, they can't find any new direction, any new path. They either drink or do drugs or fall into depression, which is understandable on many levels.
Right.
And then you have other people that are like, career's over. Guess what? I have 1,000 other interests, like Gloria Swanson. I mean,
Yeah,
people think she was like Norma Desmond. She really wasn't. I mean,
she's
she
very astute.
designed clothes. She became a sculptress. She was an advocate for nutrition. Like, this is someone that said,
Right.
well, I've got a million
Yeah,
other things I can
well,
go
that
do.
was Marsha too.
And
She was a
yeah,
songwriter.
yeah.
Yeah, I mean, she wrote a song about marriage equality at age 95.
I mean, just the depth of this
Music and
woman's
lyrics, by the way.
just the depth of this woman's talent and her interests.
Yeah.
I mean, seriously, like tell us about her work with the United Nations, because I thought that was a very interesting part of your documentary as well.
Well, the bottom line is that she had met Eleanor Roosevelt at the White House in 1938. It was a March of Dimes. She went to Washington with, was it Robert Taylor, Jean Harlow,
Uh-huh.
Marsha, and somebody else for the March of Dimes balls. And she continued her correspondence with Eleanor Roosevelt. And she, just spent her whole life working for the UN. She used to tell me that most people when they go to New York, they can't wait to go to Sardi's. She said, I couldn't wait to go to the UN. She had a friend named Joseph. She knew Joseph Nichols, who was the public relations person, and she had many private tours of the United Nations. And she knew she did a radio show in 1950 on the UN, and that piqued her interest, and she just kept going. She got involved locally in Sherman Oaks, and she opened up. She was responsible. She came up with the concept for local United Nations chapters to do their own shops, where she, like the UN shop in New York, got products from all over the world, and that's how they raised money for the UN.
Excellent.
Yeah, so she's a
And
smart woman.
I was also very touched by her concern for the homeless, because I've been on the board of an organization that helps the homeless in LA for like 12
Oh, I read
years.
about it. It's a fantastic group.
Thank you. And the thing is, Marcia cared about that, which, believe it or not, I found some people, they think it's a very controversial issue, because even in stuff I've done to volunteer, we've had people go say nasty stuff or be mean, or we don't want them in our neighborhood. And it's like, there are people. And the reality is, a lot of us, me included, are just a couple of paychecks away from being homeless
Oh, yeah.
ourselves.
Oh, yeah.
And people would be surprised at how close most people they know are to that. And, we live in not just LA, but a lot of cities are the cost of living is skyrocketing. The price of food is skyrocketing. And it's hard. And it's hard to admit you need help. And I think to have kindness and compassion for your fellow man, that is something that Marsha is a shining example of. Like again, she just inspires. Like
Well, you know how that all came about.
you know,
She was the honorary mayor of Sherman Oaks, and she took that role and had started blanket drives. But one thing about the valley was she was noticing that homelessness was a new problem, and so she got together with the Valley Interfaith Council, and they opened the first homeless shelter in the valley. They made sandwiches in their homes. They brought towels from their house. They bought an old, rundown motel. They ran it for a couple years, and they were having problems. And fortunately, LA Family Housing took over, and Los Angeles Family Housing tore that motel down and built a whole new state-of-the-art $1 million facility. And when I told Marsha that, she was in shock. And I said to her, Marsha, you planted the seed and you've lived long enough to see the fruits of your labor. And she was just so taken aback by that. But yeah, it's true.
yeah.
Her heart was in the right place. And yeah, maybe they couldn't make it by doing, they didn't have the budget, but somebody took over. And Los Angeles Family Housing, they're amazing.
I
They're
have a
just
friend who
amazing.
works for them.
They're just
Yeah.
amazing. Yeah, and thanks to Marsha and the committee, all those hardworking people.
Yeah. And I just respect so much how seriously she took that problem and wanted to do something about it.
Yeah, I mean, that was her top priority, I think. I mean, look at the 7 pages, 30s,
7 pages.
40s, Korean War effort, Community Relations Conference of Southern California. Um, my favorite story, the United Cerebral Palsy Association. This is such a Hollywood story. Okay, so Marsha was on Broadway, and the head of ABC, help me, took all the stars. Sarnoff? No, I forgot his name now.
Oh, I can't remember.
Because we're talking. Took him to the 21 Club and told them about the fact that his daughter had this illness, condition called cerebral palsy, and their kids are getting sent to mental institutions, and they didn't know. So, and he wanted to see how the stars could help. So Marsha, on her day off in New York, found a school that dealt with these kids, and she stood in the playground and watched and talked to teachers and everything, and just put it into her subconscious. She went home the next year. She was watching television, and she saw what she from Carthay Circle. It was some sort of, it looked like what they called the telethon. It was 1951. And she said she could tell they were trying to talk about something, and she said, I think it's cerebral palsy. But they're not doing a good job. So she called the theater and she said, are you talking about cerebral palsy? And they said, yes. Well, she said, you're not doing a very good job. And they said, well, if you know about it, can you come down? She came down, went on the telethon, and ended up doing like the next year she did a telethon for them in Oakland, and they broke all records. It was 36 hours long. She and Jack Webb did it. I mean, that's just who Marsha is.
Well, and also, as she said herself in the documentary, people worship famous stars. So sometimes when you have a name like that, and she was in 54 movies, when you attach your name to a cause, it gets more attention than an anonymous private person donating their name
Just
to
the fact that she was thinking about what Lorraine Arbus's dad said, not Sarnoff, but oh, I'm sorry, but just the fact that she thought enough to go on her one day off to research cerebral palsy.
Yeah, she wasn't just giving her name.
Right. Oh,
It
no, no,
was
she
giving her
researched
efforts.
everything.
Yeah.
So,
Let's talk a little about her film career too, because we kind of haven't discussed
I know.
that. But
She said she loved, I mean, the whole thing about Marsha as an actress, she just, that's all she ever wanted to do.
yeah.
And she, she had her choice of she had her choice of studios. Four studios were interested in her, and she chose Paramount. And I and by the way, Pride and Prejudice is on today, later today on Turner Classic
She
Movies.
made that in 1940 with Greer Garson and
Right.
Laurence Olivier.
She loved Paramount, but MGM was
Better for her.
just adored it. And it was the war years, and she was the lead in a lot of B pictures. She'll be the first to tell you, because people would always use the terminology character actor as a disparaging comment, and she said, "No, I love being a character actor."
Yeah, it's a great compliment.
But I mean, she got her name on the top of a lot of movie posters to be
Yeah.
a lead in a solid B picture. Mary Ryan, Private Detective, fun things like that.
Yeah.
Pilot number 5. I mean, this is what people remember. Oh, the human comedy.
With Mickey Rooney.
Yeah, she doesn't have a big part, but it's a great character part.
And she's in Smash Up, Story of a Woman.
Smash Up, she practically steals the film.
And I love her in Cry Havoc because it's about nurses during World War II,
Yeah.
women. That's a really good movie. None Shall Escape. I got to see that on a big screen. That's a really good one.
It's a very powerful film. She should have been this if it was Columbia, and I don't know, they should have nominated her, put her name in for the Academy Awards.
Yeah,
But they didn't. But that was powerful
she could
film.
have gotten a Gene Herschel humanitarian Oscar. My
Well,
gosh.
that's another story. We tried, people tried. Arthur Hiller wrote letters, Larry Gelbart wrote letters, Lee Grant wrote letters, Norman Lear wrote letters, but
Whoa.
they just determined not to give it to her.
I hate to say it, that stuff is highly political
Yeah.
and highly driven by a lot of
But
things.
you know what?
than-
She could care less.
She could care
Marsha
less.
had
If you need an award for it, what's that
rooms
mean?
full of awards, and that just wasn't what she was about.
Yeah.
She was about people making changes. She wrote songs and about refugees that she donated to the United Nations. Results are she wanted to see change. She wanted to affect change, and she wanted to use her celebrity to make a difference.
And she certainly did just
Yeah.
that. Also, when I met Marsha at the American Cinematheque, she was in a film noir called Raw Deal with Claire Trevor, which is awesome. And she also wrote a book about fashion. So in addition to being an actress, an activist, a songwriter, she wrote this book. And let me show you the book because I am lucky enough to have an autographed version.
Composed the whole thing, yeah.
It's called The Way We Wore, Styles of the 1930s and 40s. And I'll hold it up to the camera. She signed it to me to Carrie, Enjoy Yesterday, Marsha Hunt. So I really, really cherish this book in my little library around here.
Yeah, it's amazing. And at one time, she told me that Jackie Onassis was interested in possibly, meeting with her, but she was going on a long 6-month trip, and Marsha didn't want to wait. And I think Marsha was the kind of person that I think she wanted the control. So she put it all together herself. This is her design,
Yeah, just show it to the camera.
her layout, her stories. And, I'm not sure that it would have if you had and she was, this is Poojan, her, what's the Bedlington Terrier? This is another thing. In the 1930s, she had met a producer at Paramount that had this beautiful dog, this Bedlington Terrier.
Mm-hmm.
And they were new to America, very new. And Marsha got one of the first Bedlington Terriers in America.
Very cool.
Yes, it came from somewhere in Europe, but Poojan was the dog's name. She always had dogs. She and Robert always had animals.
Tell us about her husband, Robert.
Robert was a screenwriter. He started out as a radio writer for Orson Welles for something theater. Come on, not Zephyr.
Mercury Theater.
I was gonna say Zephyr. Mercury Theater, and she met him at a party at Orson Welles' house, and they went from there. But he was a screenwriter and then later a television writer in the 50s and 60s. But obviously in the 40s it was radio. Um,
And they seemed very happy from what I've
very,
read and
very
things.
happy. Long marriage. Yep,
Rare in
long.
this town.
Um,
But what you said in the documentary is they didn't live a Hollywood life. And I think that's probably
no,
one
and
of the
that's
reasons that,
part of the activism, isn't it? Yeah.
yeah,
Um, yeah, Marsha loved radio too. She really just was a very versatile person.
with a lot of interests.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah.
know who said it, but maybe Vincent Price did, but there's a phrase, the person who limits their interests limits their life. And it seemed like Marsha had an unlimited
Oh no, she was
life.
constantly like let me tell you, one of her pet passions was an event that she called Thankful Giving. And this was her idea that this was on Thanksgiving Day, this was our opportunity to pass the hat and talk about food insecurity and hunger. And as a family, we were going to decide where to donate. Um, so she got this organization. She brought it to the House and the Senate, and it was passed. But they didn't give her any money. So it was always the one cause that got away from her. So at age 98 and 99, I saw a letter. One time she got a letter from Jimmy Carter. She was pitching Thankful Giving to Jimmy Carter because he had done a presidential proclamation on Thanksgiving in 1978 for Thankful Giving. And let me tell you this story. At the end of the letter, he said, Marsha, you've done so much in your life. Why don't you rest on your laurels? And Marsha was furious that he said that because she was always had a cause. She always had something left to do. And Thankful Giving was the cause that got away. And, I have to tell you that my takeaway from working on the documentary with Marsha and what touched me most was that hunger and world hunger and food insecurity were her top priorities. She was very involved with Freedom from Hunger, which was a domestic organization helping people. She was involved with the United Nations and specialized agencies, everything to do with hunger. And I'm going to use this moment just to let everyone know that in Marsha's honor, there's my Boston accent there, honor, in Marsha's honor, I'm going to be starting a nonprofit organization dealing with food insecurity and hunger, but also not just in the community, but also within the entertainment industry, because with all these strikes, there's a lot of people that are skipping meals. I won't say that they're going hungry, but they're skipping meals. They're wondering how they're going to feed their families. And yeah, the strikes are over, but I don't think things are going to go
No,
back to,
because
especially in Los Angeles. And I'm going to start off with just Los Angeles, trying to help people in Los Angeles. And then as we all grow, you know, but we will be doing something big on Thanksgiving. I'm going to call it a day of compassionate action.
okay,
And
let me know how I can help.
yeah, so that's how Marsha really touched me. That's the one thing that touched my soul. And growing up, I had food insecurity issues too. So
I understand. And, they just announced the other day, all these 99-cent stores are closing in LA.
I don't get it.
I know a
I
lot of
don't
people who
understand.
wouldn't be eating if it weren't because there's a 99-cent store not too far from me in Burbank. They have fruit, they have vegetables. I mean, it helps people that are on a tight budget to afford
I
food.
mean, the only thing I could think of is maybe when they started charging $1.99 and $2.15 for something, maybe people kind of said, eh. But I don't think so. I don't know. I don't know what happened to the business
Well, I
model.
hear another company, though, is going to step in and try to save those stores. So Chris Nichols from LA Magazine published an article saying there's going to
Oh,
be someone that's going
really?
to save them. Fingers crossed that happens.
Absolutely.
Because again, some of the ones that have grocery sections, those are crucial to so many people.
Um, I'm trying to think of some other fun things to tell you about Marsha that you might not know. Um, did you know that her first radio show was for Lux Radio Theater for Cecil B. DeMille?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was Alice Adams was the play, and they didn't have enough she was an extra star. They already had Claudette Colbert, and some I forgot who the male lead was, but they offered her China, a set of China to act on that in that play. And then they called her and said, well, we're having a union problem and we can't allow you, we have too many stars, we can't allow you to use your name. So she chose the name Georgette Spelvin.
Did not know that.
Yeah. So, Spelvin was one of those names that writers and directors and producers used, George Spelvin, when they didn't want their name.
An Alan Smithy would be
Right,
when
right.
the name you use when you want to take your name off
But
something.
yeah, so she's just an interesting person.
Let's see if any of our viewers are asking any questions
Oh,
here.
yes, please.
That people kind of like when I do these live because they get to interact with the guest or ask a question, and that's fun for
we
people.
thrive on questions.
Yeah, so let me see. Well, we already have 39 comments. Oh my gosh.
Oh, I love you all.
Let's see.
Yeah, comments.
All right. Gary Songer, didn't Leo go on to become a director and the father of actors Sean and Chris Penn?
Leo Penn, yeah, Leo Penn was their father, as a matter of fact. Leo Penn's cousin is my friend Jane. If you're watching, Jane Fisher and Leon Penn are first cousins. Yeah.
Betsy Mullen is saying, we are determined still to secure the Presidential Medal of Freedom for Marsha Hunt. We need to update the page to appreciate your support.
Yes, that was another heartache. The Presidential Medal of Freedom, they were giving it to just, I don't want to say names, it's not polite, but it was like as if they just went through one of every ethnicity and one of every celebrity. It's like celebrity with hardly any activism. It's an uphill battle, but we had a lot of people rooting for us, but we're still determined to do it.
Like I said, these awards can be so political because
I know.
I used to work a long time ago. I used to work at Miramax and they were giving Harvey some award for charity for helping, like, I forget what it was, but I remember thinking he wouldn't even have his chauffeur stop at a red light or green light if that person was crossing the street, let alone giving him this huge award for his charitable works towards a charity, which he could have cared less about. Like,
I know.
She
deserves the Presidential Medal of Honor, and yes, Betsy, you are right. We're going to do it.
A lot of people loving Raw Deal out there. Gary Songer saying, wow, I never knew the extent of the acts of activism of the late, great Marsha Hunt. Heartwarming and inspirational.
Yeah.
And yeah, absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, the type of person she was, she told me during the Korean War, she just knocked on people's doors and asked for blankets. And then she donated them. She started this little group called the Good Neighbor Policy too. And when she was honorary mayor of Sherman Oaks, and it was a little card that you put in your window to say that you were a good neighbor, that you were living the goal, you were being kind, you were helpful. I mean, who thinks of these things? I mean, this is civics. This is basic civics that I don't know if it's still taught in the schools. I mean, Dr. Richard Dreyfuss, he wrote a book about this saying that civics are not taught in the school anymore.
Benjamin, did Marsha decide to be at Hollywood forever? She did. Her father, Earl Hunt, is at Hollywood forever.
Just down the hall.
Yeah, and Marsha is interred in the Abbey of the Psalms.
Yeah, I'm very upset that I just found that out because I would have visited her parents while she was alive.
Did Marsha really cook? Ruth Munsack's wanting to know.
I don't know that because I knew her when she was older and Robert had passed away. I know that her home was a hub for family, so they maybe her sister Marjorie cooked. That I don't know.
We don't know. Ruth is also wanting to know, does she have any kids or family still with us?
She has her beloved nephew, Alan Hunt, esteemed director, actor. She has grandnephews, Monica, Christian, Ashley, Larry, Bajan. Yeah, so she never ended up having children of her own. She lost a child.
So sad.
But she also felt her work with the UN was that the children of the world were my children. Yeah, the
Yeah.
children of the world were her children. She'd do anything for them. I mean, I always say the United Nations. I'm surprised she had time to act or even, play tennis or do any other stuff that they did because that just was her passion.
And I saw this photo that made me so happy. I think it was taken at Larry Edmunds in Hollywood of Marsha Hunt and Norman Lloyd greeting each other. And they're both like in their hundreds. Norman lived to be 106, Marsha 104.
Best friends.
And they
Best
seem
friends.
so happy to see each other. And it's so fun to see that photo.
Well, they were friends from New York, but his Norman's wife, Peggy, was a classmate a couple years, best friends with her sister Marjorie. So they were lifelong friends, lifelong friends. Yeah.
Two absolute titans,
Oh
by
my
the way.
God,
Oh my
yeah.
gosh. It's just amazing
I
to think
know.
of the energy in a room where
Right,
you have two people like that.
right. Yeah.
It's incredible. So, what would be your favorite Marsha Hunt performance if you had to pick one?
Well, I love None Shall Escape
I do
because
too.
it's just so powerful
Yeah.
and her passion for anti-Nazism and just for the empathy. She tried to have empathy for her ex-husband and just the horror she went through. The storyline that against what was happening in Poland. It was just rough, tough,
Yeah.
potent. Um, and good old Henry Travers playing her uncle, the priest. Yeah.
Yeah. That's an excellent, excellent film.
The film too I love too is you ever get a chance to see is Carnegie Hall. And it's kind of like the Turning Point, the one with Shirley MacLaine and Anne Bancroft, because in the Turning Point they have performances of like a real ballet, and in Carnegie Hall, Marsha plays Nora, who works her way up from a washwoman to a booker, a talent booking talent at. Have you ever seen Carnegie Hall?
I haven't, but I
And they inject Lily Pons and Arthur not Arthur, Toscani. I'm saying all the names and Yasha Heifetz. All these real performances within the film, and it's another gem. TCM doesn't play it a lot because it's an independent owner of the film, and maybe there's licensing problems.
yeah, this
But
can be
but
complicated.
Carnegie Hall, I know it's out there on YouTube or VHS or wherever. It's another really good film of Marsha's to see. And of course, how about that film that she did with Eddie Muller? It's
Yes,
at
the
90
Grand
years old,
Inquisitor.
The Grand Inquisitor.
Yeah.
That is on the internet, and she's 90 years old, and she's brilliant. She had limited eyesight. Um, she's just amazing. I mean,
She is.
yeah, her heart. I mean, she's an actor.
Yeah.
She's an actor's actor.
There's some people that you just wish they could go on forever because the world
Yeah.
is so much better with them in it, you know?
I just have one more a quick story to tell you. Uh, I also love the story about how Marsha came up with her name. She was born Betty Virginia Hunt. Is that her? Do you know this story?
I don't. Tell me.
So she was at the movies. It was 1934 with her mother in New York, and there was a Joan Crawford movie, and the character's name was Marsha. And her mother whispered to her and said, that was supposed to be your name. And but your grandmother said, absolutely not. Marjorie, and you already have a sister Marjorie, and to have a Marsha is just very confusing. So Marsha, this is when she was finishing high school and she was taking acting classes, and she decided, if I'm ever going to be an actor, that's what I'm going to change my name to. But she was talking to her girlfriends and said, like, well, I don't like this Marcia. I don't like this spelling, Marcia. And I think it sounds like Marcia. People don't know that's Marsha. So she decided she was going to spell it Marsha. And she tells the story about when she and her mother came out to Hollywood to meet their uncle. And that's when she got discovered. But she had a sixth sense about it. And she said, I dumped Betty Hunt in the Mississippi, and from then on, I became Marsha Hunt. So when she got off the train in Pasadena, her name was Marsha Hunt. And then she got discovered that week because of the two photographers that had it all set up with the press.
Oh,
But you got to watch the documentary, which, by the way,
Right.
is going to be on Turner a week from tomorrow. So it'll be on Turner Classic Movies. Set your VCR because it's on 8 a.m. in Los Angeles, 5 a.m. in Manhattan and on the East Coast, and then in between for Central and Mountain Time. So set your VCRs, and I'm curious at what time it'll play in Canada, but it will be on, and it's I really thank Turner Classic Movies. This is the fourth time the documentary is going to be on.
And if you haven't seen Marsha's films either, they show them on Turner Classic Movies.
That's right.
Quite a number
Pride
of
and
them are on
Prejudice
DVD.
could be on right now,
Yeah.
for all I know.
And by the way, here's how the mixture looked like. I'm gonna pop this in the oven, but here's how the brownies look like. They have a nice height to them, and the difference between this and the Katharine Hepburn brownies is that these are more cake-like. The Katharine Hepburn ones are very, very gooey. So totally different
Really?
kinds of brownies here. You can see. And should we have a brownie toast to Marsha Hunt?
Yes.
All right, to Marsha.
Marsha, Marsha, Marsha.
And thank you so much. Please keep tuning in for more food, fun, and film history from Hollywood Kitchen.